My name is Agustin Fuentes. I'm an anthropologist, and the work I do is looking at what makes humans tick and what makes humans relate with other animals and what that means. So, for the last 24 years or so, I've been doing research on non human animals and humans, mostly primates. So humans are primates, just like apes and monkeys. I've looked at monkeys and apes in captivity. I've worked with monkeys and apes in Southeast Asia, and North Africa, and Gibraltar. I've worked with them in the jungles, and I've worked with them in the cities. I'm really interested in understanding sort of how we relate to other primates, how other primates relate to us, and what we can do to create a future where we're both still around. So one thing that really interests me as far as primates are not so much those that are going extinct, but those that are doing really well. So a lot of my recent work has to do with primates in cities, monkeys in particular. Macaque monkeys throughout Southeast Asia, throughout South Asia, throughout Central Asia, or parts of Central Asia, and even in Southern Europe, in Gibraltar, live in urban environments, and they live with people. Thousands of monkeys, hundreds of thousands of people, and they do pretty well. So I want to ask the question, how come some monkeys can live with humans and others can't? What makes that work? So it turns out macaque monkeys do well with humans. Living in cities, macaque monkeys can avoid humans when they need to avoid them, deal with humans when they need to deal with them, but most importantly, they can live in the human world. They can live off the foods we live off, they can live in the kinds of temperatures and climates, they can live in and around our houses. One of the biggest problems with studying sort of human-monkey relationships or human-primate relationships is that they're so varied. In much of the world, humans love to see primates, but hate it when those primates are in their backyard or coming into their kitchen and taking stuff out of their refrigerator. In most cases, people and macaque monkeys in urban environments do pretty well together. But sometimes there's conflicts. And usually that conflict is over space. It's as people encroach more and more into the monkey spaces or change the landscape such that the monkeys have to spend more time in human spaces, that's when you start to see conflicts. The conflicts usually aren't that bad, but they can get blown out of proportion. I think The Politics of Species is an important book and an important concept. The idea that we are not alone on the planet. Humans are part of the world, and the world is becoming more and more influenced by what humans do. It's our responsibility to try to maintain sustainability as best we can. There's a politics here because our relationships with other animals, particularly other primates, are very complicated, and negotiating those in a way where there's give and take on all sides is something that we have to come to terms with. So the politics of species can be a nonsensical term. What it really means is that there is a crisis right now, and we need to resolve that crisis through negotiation, through compromise, and through some pretty complex solutions. The politics in Politics of Species is really directed at us. We need to make some tough decisions, and we need to act on them. So when I say redefining the human-alloprimate interface, I'm talking about us, humans, and alloprimates. Those are those other primates that live around humans. So rather than seeing us here and as humans and other primates as sort of living around us or a conflict between us, we need to recognize that for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, maybe even a million years, humans and human ancestors have been living with other primates. So it's not living against, it's not the conflict focus that we need to be orienting on. It is the living with. We have good evidence for tens of thousands of years that humans and other primates have coexisted. We need to understand why in some cases that's maintained and in other cases it's not. One of the biggest problems with looking at the relationship between humans and other primates is that humans are growing faster and faster and faster. We are in the Anthropocene, a new sort of geological epoch where humans are one of the driving forces in global climate change. If we don't take this seriously now, take this politics of species to heart, and recognize that the pace of change is so fast that things are going to disappear before we can even study them. So what we need to do is understand what's working and try to use that information to make other things a little bit more sustainable. What does well in this sort of a human expansion and engagement with the world? Macaque monkeys. There are millions of macaque monkeys throughout Asia in urban environments. They're living well because they're socially flexible, their dietary patterns are like us, their digestive tract, the way they behave is similar to us. They're flexible, like humans are flexible. So understanding how this human-monkey relationship works is going to give us a little insight into maybe improving the relationships between humans and other animals. What's not working right now is the relationship between humans and the great apes. Humans and chimpanzees, for example, or humans and gorillas, or humans and orangutans, we overlap so much in our body size and are so very different in the kinds of needs we have about food and the forest and space that we clash, and those clashes are getting worse. So if you look at the relationship between humans and orangutans in Southeast Asia, the human drive to manipulate the environment for capital gain, palm oil plantations, for example, the whole idea that palm oil has become this enormous source of capital for the world is directly killing orangutans. It's destroying the landscape, it's destroying ecologies. Most people who use palm oil aren't intentionally killing an orangutan, but by this reliance on an easily accessible but highly ecologically destructive type of plant, we're wiping out the orangutans. So that's one example. Let me give you another example. In much of Central Africa, there's an enormous pressure put on local populations because of political instability and economic problems. This enormous pressure drives them to focus on the only source of protein they have left, which is bushmeat, which is access to primates, even chimpanzees and gorillas, as their only source of protein. Because of the human-induced economic and political instability, we're seeing all of the animals and the forests suffer. Well, for me, personhood and rights are two different things. I see human persons, I see chimpanzee persons, I see macaque persons. I think we have to be very, very careful about not trying to make another organism be human. A chimpanzee is not a human is not a chimpanzee. But a chimpanzee person is a complex organism with an incredible cognitive and social life, as are humans. And I think we have to recognize the complexity of other primates and other animals first as a baseline. And when it comes to rights, I think we have to understand as a community of humans what it means to cause such wide-scale suffering and damage to other species. And we have to decide, as we've done again and again throughout our history, when we're going to say enough is enough. And we don't want to do this to other beings, to other persons who share the world with us. So flagship species are very sort of easy to talk about. Everyone is very interested in elephants right now, as they should be. There are 96 elephants being killed a day in Central Africa. It's a horrendous context. However, there are also many, many chimpanzees, gorillas, small antelope, and forest rats being killed. The problem with using a flagship species is that sometimes people forget these are gigantic ecosystems that are being destroyed. And they're being destroyed because of human political, economic, and social realities. So what can we do? How do we go from looking at one mega charismatic species like a panda or an elephant or even a gorilla and get something done? Well, part of that is to convey information. It turns out in some places of the world, gorillas are doing okay. In most places, they're not. How do we understand that? How do we convey that information? We need to talk about where gorillas are doing okay and where they're not doing okay, where chimpanzees are moderately okay and where they're not okay. And we have to ask the question, why? What's going on? What's the difference in cultures? What's the difference in economics? What's the difference in politics in those areas? It's a really difficult set of questions, but we've got to get serious and do it. So a lot of people say we need a moral or ethical revolution within the human primates, right, to really move this change forward. I don't think so. I think we're already there. I think we've lost the recognition of what we've done. We as humans shape the world around us as it shapes us. We are incredible in our ability to bond, not just with family, but with others, with strangers. Humans can even bond physiologically in the way we bond with an infant. We can bond with another species. That's inherent in being human. What we need to do is recognize who we are and what we've done for the past couple 100,000, if not million years, and why we stopped doing that, and maybe get back to that. So theory of mind is one of the big hallmarks, right? This is like, well, is something worthwhile because it can think like us? I think that's a dangerous question to begin with. But let's put that aside and ask, can a primate know that he or she is him or herself and that there are other him or herselves out there? And I'd say, yeah, in many cases, of course. Problem is trying to hold other organisms to our hallmark. A chimpanzee makes a bad human, but a human makes a pretty bad chimpanzee. I think we have to understand social complexity. So rather than trying to figure out, can they see a dot on their forehead, we need to ask, what kind of rich, deep social lives do they have? Do they love their offspring? Do they have complex social relationships? do they think and feel and experience in ways that we can understand? And the answer is yeah, they do. That, for me, is the important question. So the concept of the soul is a powerful one. And I think most people don't understand what they're talking about when they talk about a soul. If you want to get into the theological and philosophical implications, you can talk about Thomas Aquinas, you can talk about Kant, you can sort of rank whether or not something has a soul. The problem is we need to ask, if you're talking theologically, what does creation mean, right? What does it mean to be made in God's image, if that's the take that you want to ask? On the other hand, in a philosophical sense, if a soul is the ability to be in the world, to be with others, to be cognitively complex, and to have social dynamics and processes, then I think many things have to have a soul. And if we try to indicate that they don't, we're doing the same thing that people have done politically over the last 500 years, of trying to get even humans out of the game by saying they don't have souls. I think Western religions, even though there's a lot of misrepresentation of what's actually going on in Western theology today, but Western religions, you can say, have missed the boat to a certain extent on the interface between humans and other animals by not recognizing the fact that we are animals. Most other peoples in the world that are not tied to the big Western religions exist in a place where there isn't a dichotomy between nature and human. That dichotomy is false. We are part of the world and the world is part of us. Until we get that through our thick skulls and our big brains, we're still going to have trouble making differences. Culture has always been fascinated by our relation to animals. I mean, if you look go back to one of the big ape movies, King Kong, there's never a dry eye in the house, when Kong falls off the Empire State Building. And I'm talking the original because the subsequent ones just weren't as good. The power of identifying a humanity in animals is real because there's an animality in humans. I think that connection humans have to dogs, to monkeys, to apes, to dolphins, to elephants is not just a connection about us anthropomorphizing or us putting ourselves on them. It's because we see in them a commonality. And there's where popular media should really be taking the baton and running with it and showing us not so much that other animals, particularly apes, can be like humans to succeed, but more importantly, that they can be like themselves. And in and of itself, that's valuable. In my chapter, I talk a lot about this thing called niche construction. It's basically the idea that over evolutionary time, humans have done really well in the world by responding to the outside pressures. As the world attacks us, as challenges us, we react. And as we react, we reshape the world. We actually change the way the world works. And that's something that we need to think about in our relationships with other organisms. If our success is dependent on the fact that we have molded the world as it molds us, then there's a little ray of hope. There's some optimism there because we're able to change the world in multiple directions, and it's up to us to decide how we do that. Humans are not evil by nature. We're complex. The one thing we do know from evolutionary studies is that humans change the world as it changes them. And we need to take that to heart and change the world in such a way that multi-species realities are sustainable and not dead ends.